I actually love the ending because you did a presentation about data analytics, and actually you didn't really talk about data analytics. But the reason I actually love this is data analytics is a how, the what is important, and you and I know categorically that.
Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
My name's Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
On this episode, we're going to cover data analytics and project management. For an upcoming presentation that I'm giving to some grad students, I've created some slides going over what is data analytics, how is it used in project management, and some of the future implications. So Greg, talk to me real quick about data analytics.
Well, just in general, data analytics. I think number one is whenever people have a conversation about this, they really need to start with definitions. So
I have those. I have
in your presentation.
Yes, I do. This is great.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What I'd also say as well here is, the same presentation you're giving is going to be asked for in almost every single project management company in the world at some point. So the reason to the listeners that we're giving this, steal the presentation. Take what Micah has done, do your own slides, and just do it. Like, this doesn't need 1,000 people to do 1,000 different answers. There's about 3 answers. So I just say, use this podcast as a shortcut to make yourself look awesome.
Yeah, and Greg's going to provide open and candid feedback. He has not seen the presentation before. I've actually not given it before. So we're going to see how this goes. Let me dial this thing up and we can get rolling.
How many slides are you doing?
Oh, too many.
Oh, is it one of these quick flick ones, 10-second a slide?
Yeah, I think so.
I really like those, by the way. I like those loads more because it creates the feeling of pace.
You know me. I am Mike Pipo. I've done some things. I've worked some places. We've covered them a lot on this show. So I'm not going to hold on too much to this. But quick shout out and plug for me and Beyond Deadlines. We have a newsletter. We have 2 different ones. We have a LinkedIn one, a email newsletter, and you're obviously listening to our podcast. So if you want to, we're presenting. So I would recommend watching this on Spotify or YouTube because a lot of the slides will be obviously presented on the screen. And so if you're following along on just pure audio, it may not catch up to you, but there's some QR codes on the screen that you can scan to go through. I actually didn't update this slide, so I'm going to skip this one. Shout out slides go as well. That's where I got the format for this. And I think there's a thank you at the end. So beginning, like I said, Greg, we're going to cover definitions and a couple other bits and pieces. So to me, and I wonder if you actually agree with this definition, but data analytics, the process of collecting, organizing, analyzing data to make predictions and informed decisions. I really think that data analytics is geared towards making decisions. What are your thoughts?
Data analytics within businesses, yes. And I'll actually just caveat this with, if you do a hard science like physics or mathematics or engineering, something really element of hard science, you've got fundamentally 3 types of data analytics. You've got one which is hypothetical, so that's theories. So you're just going, I'm just going to plug some numbers together and I'm going to say that a system works in this way. You've got, I'm going to bastardize some language, a regression one, which means that I'm looking at data that the real world has given me and trying to infer how a system works. And then you've got a prediction. So I've either done one or two, so I've got a theory about a model, or I've inferred data from the real world, and then I'm going to use that to try and predict how a system works. And you can gauge the accuracy of a theory by its ability to predict how a system works. Data analytics can sit in any one of those 3 buckets. So I'd be like, Is it a theory about a financial model you're going to deliver in the workplace? Is it an analysis of actualized data and you're just saying what happened in the past? Or is it a model that's going to try and predict workflow that you can test again? It has to be testable, that third one.
Well, where you're going with it, and I'll agree on your definitions, and I think you're getting very detailed and being, very clear with your definitions. But I would argue all of those will eventually point to some sort of decision. Because to me, if data for data's sake is a hobby, if it's in business and it's on a project, and this is geared towards project management, it should be pointing towards a decision. And so the key thing is, and then what's a project? Ooh,
well, actually, let me reverse you. Micah, what's the decision? People might laugh at home and go, no, seriously, what's the decision?
We're gonna get into that in a couple of slides, and I'll break that down later, and maybe based on your feedback, I'll pull it up sooner in the definitions place. But if you've ever heard this before, this is a standard ripoff of a definition. A project is a temporary endeavor. It has a defined start and finish date, and it has defined scope and resources. If you're lucky enough to define those. Now, this chart is to represent where, or basically over time, a project creates data. And that's the key thing to keep in mind. So over time, regardless of the project, regardless of what they're doing, you'll start with a little bit of data, and over time, data will grow. And that happens through cash flow, that happens through scheduling, quality, whatever it is. The if and how the data is used is dependent on what systems and processes people set up as they go through the project. And if you want to dial into specifically on a project, more where data comes from, I don't think you need to look any further than the 10 knowledge areas from the PMI.
Good reference there, by the way, to the PM
shout out
10 knowledge
shout
areas.
Out to the PMI.
People don't mention those enough in my mind because it literally is the design model of projects. Okay, well done.
Yeah, I had a project or a manager that this is kind of core in his brain whenever we went to solve something that is, of decent scope, is basically what are these 10 areas and how are we going to manage them? And they can be managed in different levels of complexity and diligence depending on what they need. But even on a small effort, so let's say, hey, I'm just going to create a new dashboard for this analytics thing. It's like, well, how are you communicating that? What's your communication plan? So I always really like this, but these are roughly, if you look at a project where data can be generated from. Now, going back to and this isn't the definition of it, but I think how businesses and projects move forward are decisions. Decisions, and I get more into the detailed definition of this, drive action. So a decision is meant to drive action. And really at the root of that is to solve a problem. We'll get to that later. Shout out to Peter Drucker, by the way, Effective Executive. If you haven't read it, go out and read it. There's different types of decisions out there. And so they can be operational decisions. I'm not going to read all these, but essentially there are a multitude of decisions that go down. And my argument would be if you're going to spend a ton of time creating data analytics to impact decisions, you should look for the biggest and juiciest ones to probably attack for biggest impact. Now,
I'm not comfortable with the definition of decision, if I'm honest. I very much like the categories. I'm not comfortable with the definition of decision.
That's not the full definition, though. Did I say it's definition? That's just the types.
Why are you telling me types of decisions before you give me a definition?
Because my slides aren't all the way in order because it's the first time.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's keep going. I'd pull it to the front because my OCD is going haywire right now.
No, we always talk about on this show. If you're going to present anything, practice it first. I just happen to be practicing it in front of hundreds of people, and Craig at the moment.
Thousands of people now.
Thousands of people. There are dozens of us. So to why do we focus so much? Why am I focusing so much on decisions? I think they're core to project delivery. And there are numerous things that lead to bad decisions makings. The biggest one to me is just bias in when you make a decision. There are hundreds of these biases out there. You can go research many of them. I've listed a couple of my favorite down here below. Mm-hmm. But essentially, if you're going to make the decision of whether we should start or stop this project, okay, you have inherent bias that you may be bringing to the table. For one, you may be a super optimistic person who thinks we can slam dunk every project. So of course we should start that project, right? you may be a person who I've always delivered my projects on time, and nothing's actually ever wrong happened to them. And so I am unique in that aspect, but my uniqueness is why I think we should go deliver this project. And then the other one is maybe like anchoring. So essentially the latest piece of information you received, oh, well, the last cash flow looked good and the last progress looked good. So that's why we should continue doing the project. And data analytics is there to really help bust those biases and provide you better frameworks of looking at, what could potentially actually happen. Data is here to save you. So the timeline of Project Data, this is, just overall in history, if we want to talk about it. At the very beginning, you had people doing stuff on paper, and then computers came in and they were individual and they could solve things. Then information moved to the cloud, and now we're in the age of AI. So over time, our ability to leverage data to make decisions is increasing exponentially. It is just going completely off the charts. And then just going a quick tangent, if you've ever heard this podcast before, you heard me talk, exponential growth is just one of those things that's a complete mind bender. So a little riddle for you, Greg, if you would, right? So, and I hope you know the answer to this, but in a pond, there's algae growth. Every day the patch doubles in size. If it takes 23 days for the growth to cover the entire lake, how long would it take for the algae to cover half the lake?
Roughly 22.1 days.
Exactly. And so I think when you think about how crazy that is, that it's like at one point it's half and then one point it's covered, that's exponential growth.
Exponential growth is what is it, 2.23 or something like that, multiple? Yeah.
So transition a little bit. Then let's see today where some data analytics are used, because people are coming from different places out there in the world and different experiences. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of examples to show what is potential. And especially in construction, with technology being kind of delayed in its integration, let's see just overall a couple examples where, technology is today. The CEO of Google thinks it's, AI is more important than fire. And so if you're using AI on your data analytics, that's obviously has a profound impact.
Arguably, yes.
Arguably. I don't know. Fire, if you've ever had a good steak before or some nice
seared it's actually the exponential law that you just talked about. Fire had an impact on hundreds of thousands of people, whereas artificial intelligence is increasing the productivity using a power law on billions of people.
Yeah. And so, rockets land themselves. How does that happen? Well, it happens with a lot of visual-based advanced calculations, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have sports are won through data now. Soccer, baseball. There is increasingly...
Shout out to Moneyball, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Shout out to Moneyball and Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
Cars drive themselves. Now you can get an argument of whether they're fully autonomous or partially autonomous, but last time I checked, if you rewinded the clock back 20 years, cars were not doing that.
Yeah, irrelevant. It's not zero.
Yeah. Money is managed by algorithms. I think it's, anywhere estimated between, a half to 2/3 of all money is managed by computers, essentially, algorithms. Now, people are obviously managing those algorithms, but again, you rewind the clock back 20, 30 years, there's human beings making these trades, not computers. The most complex game, not most complex game, one of the hardest games that people never thought would be beat has been beat by AI. There's an amazing documentary on it. You can go watch it with the, I think it's on maybe Netflix, or I'll put a link in the show notes.
I remember that.
And then the other one that obviously is one of the most advanced AIs we've ever seen is literally an app on your phone these days. So at any point in time, you can pull out your phone and ask a super advanced AI increasingly complex questions to do loads of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then on a personal note, you have the ability to create a 5,000 project portfolio and database worth an estimated $6 billion and then run analytics on it on yourself. So in a fairly short amount of time, I wrote an article on it. It's on the screen. I'll include it in the show notes. You can go in, have it create for you a synthetic database of any amount of projects you want. You can have it skewed any way you want, and then you can practice running your own analysis on it through ChatGPT. So the world we're living in now is one where the capabilities you have to perform the data analytics are just completely out of this world. Now, transitioning more, and I think this title slide's off again. I gotta go fix my title slides. But going back to the definition of data analytics and informed decisions, and getting back to what Greg so adamantly wants to argue about.
Not argue. I've just got I've got mild OCD, okay? I've got mild OCD.
Discuss.
Yeah.
So, one of my favorite quotes of all time is, and this section is more dealing with like the tactics of data analytics, but Mr. Lincoln said, if I'm going to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend most of my time sharpening my axe. And I believe in any sort of problem that you're going to solve or decision you're going to try to make, really sharpening the axe is hands down the best way to spend the vast majority of your time. So what does that look like? If you broke down the steps that we previously presented to do some data analytics, you want to start with the decision. What decision is trying to be made here? Now, I know, Greg, you could pop in and say, well, there's sometimes you have this like big, weird sort of data and you don't know what decision you're making. You're just going to like go for it. I think those cases are fewer than what most people are probably going to be doing on a project.
Actually, I completely agree with you. Like, I own an AI company that analyzes project data. You always start at the decision and you work backwards. And I'll tell you what you get if you don't. You get a bunch of consultancies saying it will take us 7 months to structure your data and then we'll be able to start analyzing it. And I'm like, what kind of trash is that? What kind of rubbish are you talking here? Give me 5 days and I'll find you $1 million of savings, and then we can start to do bigger stuff. I completely agree with you on this.
Yeah. And so then, like, what if you're going through what a decision is to me? You have decision, and if you walk backwards, you have a set of solutions, and those solutions are solving a problem. Picking that solution means taking an action, moving forward. If the decision is we want to set, say, 5 million out of the project, well, what are the solutions that are going to allow us to make that decision? Right? I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, or 5. And then there's obviously a problem behind that solution. And I guess if I wanted to redraw this, there could be problems behind each solution, but it looks better if you point it to one problem. There is a tendency, though, when you go try and find the problem, to stay at the surface level. And so to me, being really, really good at problem diagnosis is a super important skill to have if you're going to do data analytics. So, in any sort of issue that could come up, like let's say the team is missing deadlines in this example. Well, on the surface level, the symptom is, they underestimate the work and their commitments. So, if you're not going to go deeper than that, you could be like, maybe they need to be incentivized to make better ones. Maybe they just need a software to solve them better. Maybe, whatever it is you could think of to go solve that symptom. But if you go down a step further, you find, hey, maybe the team doesn't actually know the scope of the project that they're estimating. That's why their estimating's bad. And so you got to keep digging down until you really chisel out that problem and find like, what is that hardcore defined root cause problem? And there's a couple different strategies for that. You can research these online. 5 Whys, cause analysis, fishbone. My favorite that I've kind of created is a pre-retrospective. And this one, I love this one, is essentially you have some issue or something that arises, and you basically say, hey, listen, if we go back in time, and say, how are we going to be successful next time? How do you then go work through that to ensure that this issue doesn't happen again? And I like doing this in like usually future projects that are coming up, but it can be used on simple data analytics as well.
I quite like the pre-mortems. So
Yeah.
you get the team together
I
and
just
say,
don't like
okay,
being so morbid. So that's why I use pre-retrospective.
you get the team to say, okay, our job is to destroy this project or business within 24 hours. You only got 24 hours. How would you go
Yeah.
about doing it? And it has to be
Yeah.
legal. Because obviously
Yeah.
you can just go burn buildings down. But like, you'd
Yeah.
be surprised at how, one, dark people are, and two,
Yeah. Well, that's why
how
I call it
easy it is.
pre-retrospective, Greg. I don't call it a pre-mortem. Yeah, but there's some really great rocks that you uncover when you do it that way, and it also transitions people, out of the I'm looking in front of my feet, and trying getting them to look up at the
Yeah.
horizon to go solve problems. So then, out of all of that, now you have the decision. You really want to start all the way at that problem, really define the problem, and the collect, organize, and analyze. There are a zillion different tools and techniques that you can go out there and utilize to go figure it out. And so that's where this is going to be unique a little bit towards industry, towards what you're doing. But I feel like if you operated from those first principles of this is going to end in a decision, let's define what the problem is and go collect, analyze, and try and predict. Now, maybe there's some circles where you fall back to the problem, right? Like you start moving forward and it doesn't quite work out. You get some different data that, I'm not saying you can't run off on a tangent here or kind of circle back, but just starting from that first principle will, make you so much more effective in data analytics. Now, one other thing is when you start looking at decisions that need to be made, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you probably wouldn't be able to build what I'll call automated or smart decisions in as much as you can now. So figuring out whether you are going to build an automated decision or it's going to be a human decision is actually super important. Because you may just be looking to automate a decision, right? Like, hey, if this invoice doesn't have this sort of stuff in it, we're just going to reject it. Great, we have an automated decision now. If it's something where you're going to then take it to someone and get an approval for, or a human being is going to make it, it's probably just a little bit of a different delivery, and you're going to end up having to sell somebody on your idea. So this is
just going back one. So I understand the point of this, but I think there's a more poignant point kind of underneath the aspects, which is there are decisions that matter and the decisions that don't. And I think that's a very important thing to note in this, especially when you're getting into data analytics. The decisions that matter are the decisions where you are allocating constrained resources, with constrained resources being calendar time, people's time, or money. And the bigger the allocation and the more irreversible the allocation, the more strategic and important the decision. When people talk about strategy, in my experience, what they talk about is large resource allocation that is irreversible. So, for example, mergers and acquisitions. When you buy a company, you can't unbuy a company and get the cash back.
Elon tried, he failed.
Yep. And here, I think, my challenge to you would be, not all problems are made equal. You've established that. Not all decisions are made equal either. If a decision isn't the allocation of substantial constrained resources that are in where it is impractical to get a refund, then that's a decision that should be made. If the decision is more simplified, then I'd be saying the problem's not important enough, or the root cause really hasn't been driven out.
Yeah.
If the solution to the problem is to reject an invoice with more than 5 errors, I'd kind of be like, is that really going to solve the biggest problem?
First off, folks, feedback is a gift. And that's why I love doing these sorts of things, because you get insights from other people that you're actually giving the presentation to, and it'll help you course correct as needed. I completely agree with what you're saying, that this is where, are you getting something that has high value enough? And the interesting part on the invoicing, I'd be like, well, what if we do 10,000 invoices per month, and each of them are costing our company 5,000 per invoice to review.
Perfect. Perfect. Because
See,
you could
and
just
that's
go,
where
you
that
could just go,
changes.
so the problem here would be off contract leakage. We're losing 3 million a month through off contract leakage, and we're having to employ consultants at $1 million a year to fix it. I'd be like, that's a lot of irreversible resources.
But going back to your original point, what's missing in here is the problem, is the decision that you're trying to go for, and the problem that's being stated of high enough value and of importance enough to actually go through the exercise and fix, and knowing if you should. And if it's the case where you said there's like 5 invoices and this will save the company $100, it's okay to then come back with that analysis and say, this is not a problem worth fixing. If it's the flip of what I said, where this is millions and millions of dollars and tons of people's constrained time, then it could be worth going out and fixing. The other piece that I'm just rephrasing what you said, what is this going to cost the business by making this decision and moving forward? I think it's Jeff Bezos famously said, is this a door we can walk through and come back out of? That's not a very important decision. Is this a door we walk through we can't come back out of? And as you said, buying a company, you can't come back out of that door. We really need to be careful on the decision, the analysis of that decision, and are we addressing the root cause problem that we're trying to solve? So yeah, I think there's definitely some work here in this later stage on kind of decision and decision making. Transitioning a little bit to, if you are, and this is where I may go a little off piece. I don't know. I'm kind of still working on the very end of this presentation, but I was thinking about, if you are going to then go present your information to people, there's just a couple frameworks you should be aware of, like situation, complication resolution. And when you structure either your presentation or your report, whatever it is that the company is looking for, that medium, just to do it in this sort of framework, because it will help you communicate your idea more clearly. There's also a couple.
I've never heard of SCR. I use STAR and SPIN. I've never heard that. I like this one. This is a good one.
Throw your acronym out there. It all means
STAR:
the same
situation,
thing.
task, action, result. SPIN, situation, problem. I is impact, and N is needs payoff. So outcome.
To me, it's just pick a framework, because that will help you go build this out in a much more efficient manner. And I'd also recommend, if you're building a slide deck and you're doing presentation, write it out in a doc first and then go create the slides. There's nothing worse than finishing a slide deck and then having to go redo slides because of, however it is. And then this actually goes back to a little bit what you're talking about earlier, is know who's the decision maker and what their priorities are and what they're looking for and how they view this. And there's loads of different tactics in the corporate world that you can go do about influencing peers of the decision maker, ensuring you come to the table with agreement by getting feedback early and often, and then also understanding, is that the actual decision maker? There's loads of meetings I've gone into where stuff was presented and people are looking around like, who's the actual decision maker here? And so just knowing who that person is will save you loads of time. And then lastly, as we kind of wrap things up here, that piece that I kind of glossed over about the data analytics, to me, the call to action is, if you want to get good at data analytics, go do data analytics. If you go back and read my article with ChatGPT and the experience over my career, there's no training, there is no class or course that will help you enough as like find a problem and then go solve the problem, because that will lead you down the road of using the tools that will actually help you the most. For example, you can today go take a SQL class and become very strong in SQL. But if you don't have a problem to solve that revolves around SQL, is that information very useful? Or if you've learned all the basic kind of inputs and formats for it, and you go solve your problem, it's not there, you're not going to pick it up as a tool and make it very effective. And I think that goes for just about anything. So my encouragement to the audience and the crowd would be, go build something. go do an extracurricular assignment. Okay? If there's something you're interested and passionate about building, go build it, because you're going to pick up far more greater skills. And then lastly, again, shout out to Slides Go for the slide deck and all of the help. So, Greg, we've covered the initial I would say draft one of the presentation. Initial feedback, thoughts?
I actually love the ending, because you did a presentation about data analytics, and actually you didn't really talk about data analytics, but but the reason I actually love this is data analytics is a how, the what is important, and you and I know categorically that we're in a very high bracket of earners in our industry. We've done very well. We're not at the top yet, but we're really not far off. And both you and I know that it is not the specific ability to execute. So it is not the fact that you can code SQL that puts you in that bracket. It is the fact that you can find valuable things and develop solutions to fix them, including going and finding a person who knows SQL and paying them less than the problem's worth. And I actually think one of the core skills that a large amount of people fail to develop, which is what constrains their earning potential, is this problem-focused thinking and decision-focused thinking. You and I know that when we deal with all of the SVPs and the VPs and the project directors, they're constantly just thinking, what is the decision I have to make here? And if there's no decision to make, I'm not really interested in knowing any of it.
Yeah.
So that I really like the end of the present. I really like the fact that actually you talked about how do you do data analytics? Well, actually, it's more a question of how do you find valuable problems.
I think I need to do the bottom line up front, the bluff, and maybe make that my tagline instead of saving it for the end.
That's the university. Who are you presenting to, by the way?
I think it's Boston University.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what's the class? Like, who are the people?
I mean, it's just an MBA class.
Right, so it's people who can do numbers.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. Yeah. I assume if you're doing an MBA at Boston, you can probably count. Maybe you can even multiply. So you can do elements of data analytics. Fine, cool. Yeah. So, okay.
Well, I just had this epiphany the other day where I'm trying to get, I have a weekly review thing, and instead of paying for some software doing it, I was like, what if I just created a Google form that sent me the form, and I punch in the weekly review, it goes into a spreadsheet, and then that's automated. So every week the form comes into my inbox and I don't have to think about it. And then there's some data churning on the back end that happens. And then also in my weekly review, I set out what are my next week's top priorities. Mm-hmm. And I want those emailed to me Monday and Tuesday, because if I do my weekly review on Friday, I have a horrible memory and I will always forget what I said my priorities were for Monday and Tuesday. So if I just get an email, I'll look at it. Okay, yes, those are my priorities. Using ChatGPT, it walked me through exactly how to use AppScript to build that. I literally just typed in my problem, copy and pasted, and now it works perfectly fine. I had tried to use AppScript for years. It's basically how for people who aren't familiar with AppScript, it's basically how Google products can talk to each other with a little bit of code. That blew my mind away to the point where I'm sitting there thinking about the how will become less and less and less difficult. That barrier to entry to run that Excel formula or create that thing will just become easier and easier and easier as these assistants be able to come to help you more and more and more. So then if that to me is the easy part, what's the hard part? And to me, it was on the other sides of the scale. What's the decision? What's the problem? And the framework go to. So thank you for listening, Greg. I really also appreciate your feedback on this. It's going to help me improve my presentation.
I like that you're being kind. He's being kind, everyone, because we're recording a podcast. He would still thank me, but he'd use more crude language if we weren't recording.
Oh, never. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Well, folks, that wraps it up for this week. We value your time, so we try to keep these shows short and hard hitting. As I mentioned before, if you're liking this content, please hit the subscribe button. Please share with other people who may find these topics valuable. And feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn and recommend any topic you'd like to hear. We've had several recommendations, and we're trying to work through that list as we go forward. For us on Beyond Deadlines, thanks, and we'll see you again next week.